Hi everyone, my name is Erik Adler and today I am going to talk about the fourth book in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I have here the omnibus edition, all 7 books in one volume, and of course I also have my old Swedish translations of these children's books which I read 30 years ago. I read the books again now for the first time in 30 years, and it's very interesting to rediscover this world, the world of Narnia, again after so many years. And Prince Caspian is the fourth book, as I said, according to Narnia time, but it was the second book that Lewis wrote about Narnia. It was published in 1951. And the Pevensey children, Peter, Susan, Edmund and Lucy, here return for the second time to Narnia. And a year has gone by in England, but when they come to Narnia they realize that much more time apparently must have passed, because they find an old castle in ruins, and they understand gradually that it is their old castle where they used to reign as kings and queens of Narnia in Cair Paravel. So many hundred years must have passed, probably more than 1,000 years, and it's a very different situation. And I really like this first part of the book, although it was fairly slow paced, where they first come back to Narnia, find their own castle, they find their own old equipment in the cellar, their own weapons, except for Susan's horn, which has disappeared. And they arm themselves, and then they find a dwarf and save him from drowning. And this dwarf tells them the story, because he has been sent out by Prince Caspian to find them and to bring them to him. He has called them to Narnia by means of this magic horn of Susan's. The political situation in Narnia is also very different from the last visit of the Pevensey children, because now men reign in Narnia, and the talking animals and the mythological creatures have largely disappeared, or at least gone into hiding. And this is a race of men called the Telmarines, who come from Telmar, which is another country to the far west of Narnia. They conquered Narnia actually many hundreds of years ago under their king Caspian I. And now the present princess, the future king's princess uncle, Miraz, is ruling Narnia with an iron fist. And the young prince, the future Caspian X, actually dreams of meeting these talking animals and these mythological creatures, but he's told that it is only a myth. And this hints at one of the basic topics in the book, which of course is religion and religious belief. Because Caspian wants to believe in the existence of these talking animals and these mythological creatures, and he has a teacher on this castle where he grows up who teaches him about this and also helps him to escape when Miraz finally wants to kill him, to have him killed. So the basic themes in the book are courage, facing your own fears. The Telmarines, for example, they fear the forest, they fear the sea, everything that is different and is connected to the former inhabitants of Narnia, the talking animals and the mythological creatures, and to religion, because Aslan always comes from over the sea. He's the son of the emperor from beyond the sea, we learned in earlier books. And so the Telmarines, who have conquered Narnia, fear this memory of Aslan and his possible coming again over the sea. So they fear the sea and they fear the forest, which divides them from the sea. So this is one of the topics in the book. And the second topic, of course, is religion and religious belief and the corruption of belief through human beings. And this finding of the talking animals and the mythological beings, which Prince Caspian, he is not yet a king, sets out to discover in the woods and so on, can be seen, I think, as a quest to rediscover your own childhood, and especially the wonders of childhood. When you were still a child, you believed in magic, you believed perhaps in Santa Claus as a really small child, and this sense of wonder at the world, at the magic of the world, I think is something that goes through these books and these stories. And I think this, for Lewis, is linked to religion, is linked to a religious feeling, the belief in a superior being. And you have this link, for example, in the fact that Lucy, the youngest child, is able to see Aslan, where the other children are not. They cannot see Aslan, and she's the only one who can see this godlike being for some time, and then gradually the others can see him as well when they start to believe what Lucy is telling them. And I think this is linked to this sense of wonder that Caspian has, and Lucy as well. And they both, and also other characters in the book like Edmund, they both also long for what is called Old Narnia in the book, which is almost like a longing to a state before the fall of man, the paradise situation at the beginning of the Bible, which I think is very common in fantasy, not just in religious fantasy, but I think in a lot of fantasy there's a kind of nostalgic feeling, and I think many fantasy authors, they don't really think this through, because I think this is a kind of religious feeling. You have it in The Lord of the Rings very strongly by J.R.R. Tolkien, and of course Tolkien was Christian and Catholic, and it's something that comes from romantic literature from the early 19th century, longing for an age, a kind of golden age that once was, but which has disappeared. You have it also, for example, in the very beautiful movie Excalibur, where King Arthur says that he has to fight one last time for the dream of what was and what can become again, be again in the future, something like that, he says. I think you can also draw a parallel to what Jesus says in the Gospels. I'm not a Christian myself, but I have read the Gospels some years ago, and we all know what Jesus says about becoming like children, to being able to enter the realm of God. And I think this is something that is important to Lewis, this childlike sense of wonder as a link to religion and to faith. And I think this is one of the main themes of this book series, which is especially important, I believe, in this volume, in this book. Like in earlier books in the series, the children act more like adults than as children. But in this book there is a reason for that, which was not present in the earlier books, and the reason is that they have been adults before. In The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, they stayed for decades in Narnia, they grew into adulthood, and then they came back to our world and turned into children again. And now they come back to Narnia, they are still children, but they have this experience of having been adults, so they not only know the land much better than the last time they came to Narnia, they also have an adult's experience, which I think explains their adult behavior. So I think this is okay here. What still seems a bit strange is that they physically also seem very adult. They wear armor, chainmail and helms, Lucy as well, who is the smallest child, and they wander around in the wilderness in this heavy armor. They even run uphill when they are chased by some monsters, wearing this armor, and it comes over as fairly unrealistic, unfortunately. What I also didn't buy really is the fact that Peter, who is the oldest child, but I guess here is a young teenager, he challenges Miraz, who is the present king, to single combat, to find a solution to the war between the men and the talking animals and the mythological beings. And no one really challenges this except Caspian, who is also a child, several years younger than Peter, who says, no, I should do this because he's my uncle and it's my task. but no one else challenges this decision by Peter to fight in single combat against Miras, who is an adult man. And this is fairly strange. I can understand if Peter is supposed to be a heroic character, but this seems a little bit exaggerated, actually, I think. In this volume as well, the storyteller sides with the children against the grown-ups, which I think is an interesting take in a children's book, which makes it much more personal to read, even if you read it as an adult. He writes, "Up till now, King Miras had been talking in the tiresome way that some grown-ups have, which makes it quite clear that they are not really interested in what you are saying," he writes. And you can compare this with the end of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, where Lewis makes fun of adults by describing the way the Pevensies talk after they have grown up. They are now, I don't know, perhaps in the 20s, 30s, something like that, and they talk very artificially and archaic, and it seems fairly ridiculous. It's quite funny the way they talk on the very last pages of the book, and I think Lewis simply wants to make fun of adults for a child audience, which is a very funny take, I think, of this way of writing children's stories. In this book as well, there are a few reminiscences of Tolkien, especially the talking and walking trees. There's a scene similar to that of the Battle of Helm's Deep, with the Ents coming to save the humans in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. And as I said, like in Tolkien, you also have this craving for the old world that has vanished. Lewis writes, "Since the humans came into the land, felling forests and defiling streams, the dryads and naiads have sunk into a deep sleep." Then Trumpkin says, who's a dwarf, says, "Who believes in Aslan nowadays?" There's also a scene reminiscent of the Disney movie Fantasia from 1940, which I thought was fairly funny. I think, actually, I would suspect, I don't know, but I would suspect that Lewis actually stole this from the movie, because there's a scene in the book where a very fat man comes riding on a donkey, and we are taught that he is Silenus, and he's accompanied by a young man, followed by young girls who admire this young man, and he is apparently Bacchus as a boy, who is of course the Greek god Dionysus, the god of wine. And in the movie Fantasia, you have a very similar scene where a very, very fat man comes riding on a donkey, and he has a cup with wine in his hand, which is spilling out the wine constantly. And this is, of course, Dionysus, the god of wine from Greek mythology. Okay, what did I think about the book? I thought it was exciting and original and mysterious. The first couple of pages until they left for Aslan's How. When they first came to Narnia, just starting discovering this world, they found the dwarf, saving the dwarf who from drowning, who told them the story what had happened, because he had been sent out by Prince Caspian to find them. I liked that part very much. And then they started their journey to Aslan's How to meet with Prince Caspian, and then there was this war and so on. And I think there were a few scenes that were too short. For example, there's a scene in the forest where Prince Caspian meets the fauns who are dancing, and it's just mentioned. And there are a few scenes which are written as more like overviews, not really as scenes happening in real time. There's too little happening and it's too much description, I think. So this part of the book dragged a bit. So I liked the book, but I think Lewis could have improved on it, regaining a bit of, or keeping a bit of the mystery and the feeling of wonder, which I had in the first part of the book, which was fairly slow paced. But I didn't mind that very much, because you had this fairy tale feeling in there of discovering a new world, or like in the case of these Pevensey children, a world that they had known, but which had changed very much. And this sense of longing for a world that has disappeared, but which you can find a trace here and there. I liked it very much. I thought it was very beautiful. I like the story about Caspian too, his childhood, and how he escaped from the castle, escaped from his uncle and so on. I like that part also. But then this battle, this war with Miras came, and there were too many things I thought which were not very realistic with the children and with Miras and other things. And the story also became somewhat moralistic with Aslan. So I was a little bit disappointed, say, with the second half of the book. But I enjoyed reading it, and next time I will talk about the sequel, which is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which I have read already. I liked it very much, and we will see a lot of the characters from this book, like Rippy the mouse and others, returning from that story. These were my thoughts about Prince Caspian, the fourth book in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to subscribe to this channel, to give me your comments below what you thought about this presentation, and give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and I'll talk to you next time.